right, what do you think? These are done and I'm pretty impressed. Let's grab the before here. Take a look. Pretty dramatic, right? What's up guys? Welcome to Vintage Kicks Gallery. Today we have another restoration. We are restoring this new to us pair of black and white 1985 Air Jordans that we got from the last unboxing from overnight from Japan. These need a lot of work, so this is going to be a little bit of a longer one. The plan is to give them a really good clean. We're going to redo all the white. I'm going to remove all the creasing and steam the shape back in, and then put some luster cream on the black. We're going to repair the checks. We'll see what else they need. So without further ado, let's get started. I have two solutions here. One of them is laundry detergent based and one of them is Angel's Easy Cleaner. So I'm going to use the fabric based on the tongue and the inside, and then the Angel's Easy Cleaner on everything else. First thing we need to do is take these laces out and put in a shoe tree. All right, the laces are out finally. We're going to throw these in the cleaning solution here and get started on these tongues. These are pretty bad. The writing on the tongue tag is almost all the way gone, so I'm going to go ahead and scrub this pretty good. Normally I'd be pretty gentle there and careful because the color does like to come out of those, but unfortunately age has already taken these out. So not really sure if we're going to do anything to address that. The only thing you really can do is stencil it or fill it in with a micro brush, but I'm not really a big fan of that look, so we might just leave it faded. I do kind of like that. All right, now it's time to get to the leather and the bottoms, so we need to put our adjustable shoe tree in. All right, let's get to work on these uppers, and for this we're going to use a medium bristle brush and Angel's Easy Cleaner. As usual, I'm going to be very careful around these collars. I'm just giving the inside a little bit of hydration here with this stuff. But as far as the outside here where the paint's already cracking, we're barely going to touch that. We do need to get to this leather though, because it is pretty filthy. All right, now it's time to address these soles. They are really bad, so we're gonna go to a steel bristle brush, there might be brass, and a magic eraser. Now the magic eraser, this is where it'll really make a difference. All right, we've got the uppers and the inside about as clean as they're going to get. Unfortunately, this tongue is still looking pretty ratty. So what I'm going to do with this is mix up a solution with a little OxyClean and unfortunately a little bit of bleach. And we're gonna clean this very, very carefully. But I'm probably gonna wait for that step to the very, very end. And so we can spend a lot more time on it. All right, let's let these dry and then come back and start addressing some of this paint. And we're back. What do you think so far? Quite an improvement, I have to say. We're a long way off still, but we're making strides in the right direction. Now we're gonna address the white. And as you can see, it is rough right now. After these dried, I think the black is going to need a few touch-ups on top of the Lustre cream. But the white's gonna need a lot. So I'm gonna go ahead and prep the surface using some acetone and then some mild sandpaper. The thing I'm trying to achieve here is a uniform surface, and it's not gonna be perfect, but we're gonna get it pretty close. And once the paint's on there, we get the creasing out, it's gonna look pretty good. So let's get started by prepping the surface. We're gonna use some acetone here and cotton balls to start, and then we're gonna move into some sanding blocks. And these are they're gonna need a little bit of work here. A lot of people are afraid to use acetone on older leather, but really the leather on these is about as good and resilient as you're ever gonna find, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. If you are really worried about it, you can use just regular rubbing alcohol, or you can use shoe stretch as well, but I've never had a problem with it. I do always condition the leather afterwards, but I wouldn't worry too much. When prepping any surface, it's always good to make a second pass once you do your initial, because that helps take off some of the soiling. And a lot of people only do a real light coat on there, but the more this is prepped, the better it's gonna look in the end. So we wanna make sure that we put in a little extra time now, and it'll pay off in the end. Take a look at that. That's on the second pass. Wow, check out that line. Pretty incredible. What acetone does is pretty much takes off everything, including the paint. But acetone can also be used with a little bit of dilution if you have a really stubborn stain on, let's say, a pretty resilient leather like an 85 or the sole of a shoe. You can use acetone on all of that. What you don't want to use acetone on is anything that is going to affect the sheen or the shine, because when you use acetone, it's going to take the shine off of stuff. And like, let's say you would get it on the check, which is a vinyl material, it starts to really eat into it and it can ruin the whole shoe. So look at that line here. All of that is coming off here, and that's after a deep cleaning. One of the most stubborn areas on Jordan 1s is the folds where the leather overlaps. So you want to really make sure you get in there, because if you leave some dirt in there, the paint's not going to adhere right, it's not going to look factory. And just spend a little bit extra time and make sure you get in there. You could actually kind of peel it back with your fingernail a little bit and get in deeper if you're having any issues with it. But it's always good to keep that on your mind. One of my biggest pet peeves when I see restored 1985 Jordans is the way that some people take off the glue that's oxidized because it's darker. But if you take that off, you're really taking a pair of sneakers that's 35 years old and you're restoring it the way you would do a new or a modern pair. That's not the way these should look. And that glue is, I mean, check that out there. It's a characteristic of these, and taking that off, in my opinion, really ruins the shoe. It's almost as bad as painting stitching. One area you never want to get acetone is the collars on a 85, because it will actually cause the vinyl to crack and peel up right on you. It'll happen almost instantly too. So make sure you never get anywhere near that. All right, that's gonna do it for the acetone. I'm gonna go ahead and hit these with the heat gun now to make sure there's no liquid acetone left on here. It's just a little precaution. I'm extra careful with this stuff, but you don't really have to do it. But one thing that the heat gun is really gonna do at the very end is help us take out some of those hard creases. And we're gonna do that by applying shoe stretch first and then hitting it with the heat gun. Okay, what I'm gonna do now is take a 120 grit sanding block and really lightly go over the toe box area and this area back here, just to smooth it out a little bit. That's going to really help the paint lay down in a more uniform way. And what we wanna do is take out any crevices or anything like that, any tears we'd have to fill. Basically anything that when you apply the paint over it that you would see. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab my 120 grit here. And the way you do this is just like sanding anything else, but you just do it a little bit lighter than you would with, let's say, wood. All right, it is time for paint, and for these we're gonna have to lay down a two-step process on the paint. So we're gonna use a base coat that's opaque, and what that means is it doesn't have any transparency in it. And we're gonna lay that down right on top of the main areas of the leather that have lost all of their finish. That's gonna act kind of as a new finish for us. And then on top of that, we're gonna then take some Angelus white mixed with some cream and some duller and use that as our top coat. You never want to use pure white on these because they're 35 years old and they shouldn't be white. We are, however, using a white base coat. All right, I recommend if you're not really comfortable painting in, watching edges and everything, that you tape these off. I personally don't like to tape things off because I'm a lot more careful when they're not taped off. And I don't like the way the tape lines look when you layer a bunch of paint on as well. So what I'm gonna do is just be extra careful, but like I said, if you're not comfortable doing this, tape it off. You don't have to be quite as careful on these base coats like you do with your top coats, because we do want to layer a little bit of this paint on here to kind of uniform the surface. So when we do our top coat, we're going to be very cognizant of how wet the brush is and really go in on some thin layers, but not with this initial coat here. One thing you want to avoid is only using the same direction of brush stroke, because what that can do is when the paint dries, leave brush strokes in it. So you want to kind of randomize them. The more random you can get with it, the better. And you want to make sure at the very end you give it a good look over and make sure you can't see any of those brush strokes. One thing you never ever want to do on any restoration ever is paint the edges of the leather or the stitching. And I cannot stress that enough. That gets overlooked by so many people, and you'll start to look for it now that you know when you see a pair of customs or a restoration. It is not a good look when they paint that stuff. All right, we've got our base coat kind of laid down on the toe box, and what I'm noticing is that there's some pretty deep gouges that I really wasn't made aware of until we got this paint on here. So what I'm gonna do is use some Restore Coat and go over those again with the sandpaper, but on top of the paint. That's gonna fill those deep gouges and really make this come back to life and look. So take a look now, and I'll show you when it's finished. Now we'll move on to the sides. The sides can be extra tricky with all this stitching on here, so be careful. Paint around that, don't paint on it. All right, now that we have our white base coat down, we're going to add our final coat, and the final coat needs to be done very thin, so we'll probably end up doing 3 or 4 coats on here to make it uniform. Then we'll assess and see if we need to do anything more. So I have some Angelus Cream and Angelus Flat White mixed with some duller, and that's what I'm going to use for the top coat. All right, it is starting to look good. So we are going to let this naturally dry for a while. I don't want to use a heat gun to the fresh areas, and then let's give it a look over, see what needs to be sanded, and we'll go from there. All right, I decided to give these about 12 hours to fully dry because we're going to be doing some taping around the check area, and fresh paint and tape never really mix well. So what do you guys think so far? I think they're looking pretty good. We're gonna address the black now, and the black, something's been bothering me a lot on these. This check. I generally don't like to touch the checks, but this one is so badly frailed and worn down that it doesn't really even have the correct look of an 85 anymore. So what I'm gonna do is use a product that's very similar to Restore Coat, and that is this Professional Leather and Vinyl Repair by Fortivo. The reason I'm using this and not Restore Coat is this is available in black, and anytime you don't have to paint this stuff, it's better, but it's great because you can kind of tape off the area and fill this in, smooth it out. You can use sandpaper at the end to kind of give it a factory look, and it's very, very versatile. The same product can be used if you have a gouge or a deep scratch in leather. It works wonders. It's very resilient. You can wear the hell out of them afterwards, and it never fails. So let's go ahead and use this as a reference, and I'm gonna tape this area off right here in the correct shape of the check. I'm gonna use a gift card here to smooth it out at the end, and I'm going to use this very thin and very flexible masking tape because if you use the thick stuff, you're not gonna be able to get the correct curvature. So basically, I'm going to start with a 2.5, 3-inch piece, and I'm going to go down the check so I can get a good idea of the curvature. And I'm just going to use the existing here up until the point where I can tell that it is chipped off, and lay down our first guide. By the way, if you're not really experienced, I don't recommend touching these at all. I've been doing this for a long time and tried a lot of the trial and error stuff before. You have to be extremely careful. There's no going back here. So if you mess this up, the whole shoe's ruined. Now I'm going to take the second piece and use the curve of the check on the inside to mimic that curvature, and where they meet at the top will be the point of the check. All right, that looks pretty good. And then you want to really make sure this masking tape is down because, as I said, there's no going back. So if you don't have a clean line, it's going to look sloppy. All right, now we're ready to apply this, and wish me luck. Probably gonna do multiple coats on this, just so we can really make sure it's filled in. If you try to do a full thick one right off the bat, it's a lot harder. So we will do multiples and just layer it. One little trick with working with this stuff as well is don't be afraid of the shine that you get right off the bat. The longer it dries, the duller it gets. And a little trick is to use rubbing alcohol in place of sandpaper to take the shine down and get it to match whatever you're blending with. So now I'm going to take the gift card here and I'm just going to smooth it to match the rest of the texture of the check. I'm going to go down here first, just going with the natural line. You can kind of wedge the card up against the check and get a really good line here. All right, this is looking good. take this and add a little bit right in a frayed area. Check was pretty bad. 85s do this, but you know, this one was caught a little late. You catch it early on, you can kind of stop the fraying, but unfortunately this one wasn't caught. Alright, apply a little bit more before taking this tape off. And now we need to take the tape off. So basically with this stuff, if you do make a mistake, your only real option is to sand it off. You're gonna make some mistakes in the beginning, so keep some sandpaper handy and some touch-up paint for all the rest of the areas. Go ahead and get this started. I wanna be extra gentle. And I'm gonna pull it off from the top. Really slowly. What a difference that made. Now the check's correct. All right, that's gonna continue to get duller as it dries and match up, but now we're going to move on to the black leather parts. Originally, I thought I could just use some Lustre cream to bring this back, but there are some areas in here that are missing the top layer of leather, so we need to add black paint on those first to get that to blend in when we put the Lustre cream on. So we're gonna go ahead and add black only to the areas where there is a rough edge and rough finish, then apply a acrylic finisher and then our Lustre cream. All right, I'm using Angel's flat black here. I prefer the flat black a little bit more over the regular black just because it gives a little bit more versatility for blending. So that's what I'm gonna use. And as I said, I'm only touching up here. I'm not doing a full paint. So what I'm gonna do is apply to the areas that are missing the top coat and then really blend it out. That way it matches. Now, a question you might have is, do you have to prep the leather? And the short answer to that is yes, but we've already done so in the beginning steps and we've made sure that this stuff is super clean. But especially if you plan on wearing a restoration project, you want to do everything you can to make sure that it has longevity, and part of that is prep. So anytime you're painting a older shoe, and by older I mean 20 years or so, whenever they were using Durabuck and raw leather, never paint the edges. The edges should be raw. If you're painting a Nubuck or a Durabuck shoe, you're gonna notice that the lines are almost a white color. That's the way they should be from factory. That's not wear. So when we're painting this, we're only painting areas that have no top coat left on them. If a area has lost its luster or its shine in an area, it looks a little gray, don't worry about that because the Lustre cream is going to take care of that and make the surface very uniform. All right, we're going to let that dry and come back with the Lustre cream. All right, I went ahead and taped off a little bit of this around the heel area because I want to get all the way down because there is some fading on the heel. Up here I can be pretty gentle and careful on my own, but this back will be a little bit tricky, so I did tape it. So to apply this Lustre cream, you generally want to use a sponge, but I don't have any available. I'm going to use these micro cotton balls. Hopefully that'll work. What you want to do is apply it liberally, let it dry for a little while, and then go ahead and buff it down with a nice cloth until you get a good shine. And when I say shine, I mean a factory shine, not shiny. All right, I like to fill the cap up and work out of there. That way, a little less messy. By the way, after these were dry, I did apply acrylic finisher matte by Angelus to the areas that I touched up, but only the areas that I touched up, and then I blended it out. So that will give it some protection, and that is an essential step. Never paint anything without putting a sealer or a top coat on top, or it just won't last. So with this stuff, you want to make sure you have a even coat. That's the biggest thing. And if you don't have an even coat, you can make it blotchy and it looks terrible. You'll notice the leather kind of soaks this stuff up. That's good. That means it's working. Go ahead and let that dry up front before buffing it off. And I'm going to continue on to the front of the shoe. Now, if you have a pair of black, let's say ones, and they have, or some, let's say there's black panels on here, and they're starting to look dull or not black anymore, maybe a little gray, Lustre cream is your best friend in that instance. And you can, I don't recommend it, but you can get it on the stitching. The trickiest part on a one to do this is definitely around the wings logo. So I always save that for last and spend a good deal of time on it. All right, the Lustre cream has been applied and buffed pretty good, and we have a factory sheen. Check it out. So that's what we want to see here. We don't want it to be too matte. We don't want it to be too shiny. We want to look like basically it should from the factory, like it hasn't been touched. And I think we're doing a pretty good job. So now it's time to address these soles, and I'm going to whiten them using Salon Care and my indoor light box. You guys have seen this done a million times. I don't need to bore you with it. I'll be back as soon as they're finished. Well, we're back from sole whitening, and if you stuck around this long, please subscribe and like the video. But let's take a look. I think these are looking pretty damn good right now. I don't want to do too much more to them because I don't want to over restore this pair. There are some things I might address later, but I'm not quite sure yet. This tongue tag, I mean, the only real option is to stencil it or use a micro brush. It's not going to really have a factory look. I need to decide if this is going to bother me a ton or if I can live with it. So right now I'm going to leave it alone, but we may have an upcoming video where I address just that. So the final two steps are going to be apply a leather conditioner, very thorough, and then we're going to buff the shoe out. We're going to throw some laces on and compare it to the original. All right. So everybody's now familiar with how to condition these from the last restoration video where we did the 94 bread ones. So if you haven't seen that yet, please watch it. But we're just going to take this, apply it to our applicator cloth, do one panel at a time, apply liberally, get it in there, and then buff it off. This step is so overlooked, but really, really important when you're talking about a shoe this old. If you continue to hydrate them, you can wear them like crazy, and it'll make the shoe last and look a lot better. And for those of you that have asked, we do still have the leather conditioner on the horizon. That being said, I think we're still at least a month out, probably more than that now with the coronavirus issue. So bear with me, but as soon as we have it, I will post it, and I think the price is gonna be under 20 bucks. So it's not gonna be that expensive. And it is a formula that I've been testing for a long time, and I'm pretty impressed with. As with all ones, you don't want to get any of this conditioner on the collar area. On the modern days, it's not real leather. And on the 85s, that is a sure recipe for disaster. So just don't do it. All right, now that I've got a liberal coat on here, I'm going to grab another microfiber cloth and really kind of buff this stuff off and into the leather. It's pretty self-explanatory. All right, you know you buffed enough off when it is a pretty much factory sheen. You don't want it to be super dull, but you don't want it to be really greasy either. So when you know, you'll see it when the leather is looking really good, rich in color, but it doesn't have a blotchiness or a shine, too much that is. And then when you actually wear them or just give it a little time, all of that subsides as it soaks more into the leather. All right, there's only one thing left to do. We need some laces. So, well, that was easy. All right, what do you think? These are done, and I'm pretty impressed. Let's grab the before here. Take a look. Pretty dramatic, right? So let's recap what we did here. We did a full deep cleaning, a crease removal. We did the sanding of the toe box. We did the repainting of the toe box and the white areas. We touched up the black. We used some Lustre cream on there as well. And finally, we put the soles in the light box and whitened them a bit. And these are the results after the leather was conditioned. I think these are pretty good. I'm happy to have them on the collection. Well, let's get them in the light box and check them out that way. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed that. Again, like and subscribe. Makes me feel better about myself and helps the channel. Mainly just helps me feel better about myself. And we're done. We have some really good videos coming up. We're gonna restore a pair of Chicago's that's from this same unboxing. We have a sole swap video that I'm doing. Those are generally pretty boring, but a lot of people are asking about that Zoom Air, so I figured we'll show you how to do that. The one I'm most excited about is how to redo these collars, because again, I don't think anybody's doing it. And then we have just some random stuff as well. So like, subscribe, again, I'll ask you, please. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good one.